Dorothy Must Die, Chapter 42. Before I could connect, a black ball of snarling fur flew through the air, aiming straight for me. Toto sunk his teeth into my wrist. I yelped in pain, unthinkingly loosening my grip on my knife, and watched in horror as I went clattering to the ground as if in slow motion. Dorothy had stumbled backward when I first slashed at her. Tangling her feet in the dress, she had taken off and falling on the floor. Now she screamed, pulling the dress up, quickly covering herself. "Get her, Toto! Kill her!" I shoved Toto off me. He was little, and his tiny bite had barely broken the skin, and scrambled for my knife. Stupid, I should have stabbed her in the back, but I wanted to twist the knife figuratively, too. Dorothy jabbed a finger at me, her eyes blazing with fury, probably trying to blast me with some lightning bolt spell she'd slung at Jillia. But that fury changed to confusion and then fear as the spell sparked, sputtered, and died. I grabbed my knife from the pink carpet before I could charge Dorothy. Toto latched onto my arm again. He got my free arm this time, so without really thinking about it, I stabbed him with my knife. He let go just in time, yelping and barking, dancing around at my ankles. Fresh pinpricks of blood welled up on my arm, but I ignored them. "Don't hurt my dog, you bitch!" I glanced at Dorothy just in time to see the airborne plush pink ottoman that she'd flung at my head. I ducked out of the way, but lost my balance in the process, stumbling against the nearby vanity. This was going great. Dorothy, wearing the dress the Tin Woodman had ripped, now all wrinkled and not pulled on quite right, booked for the door. Shit. "Guards!" Dorothy screamed as she fled her room. Toto yipped once more at me, and then went racing after Dorothy. I chased him, knowing I wouldn't let Dorothy make it back to the party where she could rally her guards. I'd blown my perfect shot. I'd let Knox down, in the order, and most importantly, Jillia. As I sprinted into the hall, I heard alarms squealing from all around the palace, the screams of partygoers echoing all the way up here. The halls were dim, the torches giving off less light than usual, as if even the flames were argumenting with magic. At first, I didn't see Dorothy, but then I spotted the unmistakable dazzle of her shoes, and she turned a corner. I was faster than her. I'd been trained by the Order of the Wicked, and she was lazy, drunk, and used to rely on her magic to protect her. Dorothy glanced over her shoulder and saw me gaining. Instead of heading for the ballroom, maybe knowing I would have caught her before she got there, she suddenly veered left, through a barred door normally forbidden to the maid staff, and up a narrow spiral staircase. I took the steps two at a time. The spirals of the staircase were so tight that I lost sight of her, but I could hear the shoes clicking, her breath heavy and panicked. I pressed on, getting dizzy. How high was this tower? Where was Dorothy leading me? Then I felt a breeze on my cheek. I was outside. For a second, the lights of the city below us blinded me, and then I could see again. There was a veranda-covered terrace, and Dorothy was standing with her back pressed up against the edge of the balcony. Her psycho little dog was trembling in her arms. Not so brave anymore. I had her trapped. There was nowhere for her to go. Her shoes weren't going to help her. I took a step forward. With Dorothy helpless in front of me, basically just waiting to die, I hesitated. It was different this way. Having time to think about it, not trying to kill her in the heat of the moment, I needed to be cold-blooded, to remember everything that she's done, to remember that the girl standing in front of me was a monster. And yet, I found my gaze pulled across the glittering panorama of the Emerald City, the place I'd read about in books my whole life. I was higher up than I thought it was even possible to go. I wondered what my mom would think of if she could see me now, at the top of the tallest tower in the palace of a magical fairyland 1,000,000 miles from the Dusty Acres trailer park. About to stab the former heroine of the story. For some reason, Dorothy didn't look afraid of me anymore. She just smiled sweetly at me, her eyes wide and glittering. "Amy, right?" she asked calmly. "The one that got away." I didn't reply. I knew she was buying time, a classic desperation maneuver. I inched closer. "I suppose I'll never know what happened to the real Astrid," Dorothy said, sighing. "My sweet little maid." "Like you care," I replied, not able to keep myself. Dorothy smiled sadly and half turned to gaze over at the skyline. "It's pretty, isn't it?" she said. "I come up here when I want to think. Sometimes it's almost like I see clear on back to Kansas, you know?" There was a resigned, nostalgic tone in her voice. This time I didn't let her bait me. I wondered if this sudden change in her personality was all a big act, or if maybe, somehow cutting off the flow of magic from her shoes was bringing Dorothy back to her senses. I took another step forward. She didn't flinch. "I think my Aunt Em would have liked you," she said, still smiling, talking casually like I was an old friend. "She'd think you're awful pretty. She'd want me to give you a second chance. She'd say, 'Dorothy, there's no such thing as a bad apple.' She'd know you're no killer. That they tricked you. She'd say, 'You know, Dorothy, maybe you and that Amy have more in common than you realize.'" I wasn't stupid. I knew I couldn't listen to her, but what if she was right? What if we were alike? Dorothy had been like this when she'd first gotten here. It wasn't until she killed the witches that she started to change. If I killed her, did that bring me one step closer to becoming her? No, I wasn't like her. I was stronger. Strong enough to absorb all those years at Dusty Acres, all those years of being nothing, of being a punching bag, and never letting them transform me into anything close to the cruel and twisted monster Dorothy had become. Killing Dorothy was the only thing that would make Oz great again. If it would avenge everyone she had hurt, it was what I was here for. I didn't take it lightly. I knew I'd have to live with her blood on my hands for the rest of my life, but I wouldn't let it corrupt me. They made us strong in Kansas. I could carry it. So I raised my blade. As I did, Dorothy's unassuming, folksy smile widened, spreading into a twisted grin, her red lips grotesquely stretched with hate. "Too late," she said, just as I heard a dull clanking noise behind me. I spun around to see him burst through the door, his boutonniere long gone, his tuxedo ripped to shreds. The Tin Woodman. He moved quicker than a man his size had any right to, his axe, a silvery arc, as it sliced through the air. I ducked just in time to save my head from being chopped clean off, then dove to the side. The Tin Woodman put himself between me and Dorothy. "My hero," I heard her say, and the Tin Woodman, so recently rejected, puffed out his chest. He sized me up, swinging his axe back and forth, and I saw in his eyes a homicidal devotion. Could I win this fight? One-on-one with the Tin Woodman, with only my unenchanted knife? He charged, swinging his axe overhead like he was chopping firewood. I danced aside, his blade drawing sparks from the stone rooftop. As he hefted his axe, I shot forward and stabbed for his eye, but he brought his hand up defensively, and my dagger glanced off his gauntlet. "Why do you fight for her?" I asked him, leaping backward from another brutal axe swing. "She doesn't give a shit about you." "Shut up," the Tin Woodman replied, all business. I wasn't quick enough for that last swing, and I had a shallow slash across my abdomen to show for it. I backpedaled, trying to put more distance between us. Then I heard footsteps thundering from the spiral staircase. Palace guards, or tin soldiers, or both. Dorothy's entire army. It sounded like all of them, all coming for me. I caught my breath. There was no way I could take them on like this, without magic, with just an ordinary dagger and a psychotic axe-wielding metal man already bearing down on me. The Tin Woodman swung again. This time I moved toward the blade. At the last moment I dipped into a somersault and slid underneath him between his legs. A few strands of hair, the pink that I missed so badly when looked in the mirror, floated down around me. He'd almost scalped me. But he also made a mistake. Behind him now I had a clear path to Dorothy. This time I didn't hesitate. There was only one way to accomplish my mission. "Kill her!" Dorothy screamed so loudly I thought my eardrums would shatter. "Kill the bitch!" "There must be some mistake," as I said as I rushed toward her, my shoulder lowered. "You're the bitch. I'm the witch." I barreled right into Dorothy, hugging her, her forearms knocking together as we stumbled backward. She realized what was happening, too late, slapping at my face when she should have been planting her feet. I shoved forward in a tackle, heard Dorothy cry out as her back struck the parquet, and then together we flipped over the edge. We were suddenly weightless, tangled together. The blinking lights of the Emerald City stretched out beneath us. I heard the Tin Woodman bellow miserably, and just as we began to fall, I caught the briefest glimpse of Knox as he appeared on the balcony, a sword in his hand. "Amy!" he shouted after me, his voice cracking in desperation. It wasn't Dorothy's guards sprinting up the spiral staircase. It was the Order. Too late. They couldn't help me now.